what is the essence of worship, and so I always feel uplifted by the worship here. The topic that we're going to be looking at together is seek wisdom. Now that's actually said quite a lot in the Old Testament and the New Testament, and every so often I'm going to get Stuart, my husband, to come up and read some verses. So can we have the next slide, please, Tony? And Stuart's going to read these first couple of verses.
Good morning. First of all, from Proverbs chapter 4, from verses 5 to 9. Get wisdom, get understanding. Do not forget my words or turn away from them. Do not forsake wisdom, and she will protect you. Love her, and she will watch over you. The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom. Though it cost all you have, get understanding. Cherish her, and she will exalt you. Embrace her, and she will honor you. She will give you a garland to grace your head and present you with a glorious crown. James chapter 1 and verse 5. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you.
We've been singing a lot about God's destiny, God's purpose, God's intention for our lives, and that we need to live our lives well in service for Him. But you know, the big question on an everyday basis is how, isn't it? Like, what decisions am I going to make in this difficult thing where I've got a choice between this and that? And if I choose this thing, these people will like it. And if I choose the other thing, the other people will like it. And if I choose to do something, there might be conflict in the family or somewhere else. And you know, I'm often not sure what the best thing to do is, because the Bible gives us principles, but it doesn't actually tell us what job to have, who to marry. It doesn't lay us out. It doesn't say where to build your house, or what cows to buy, or, you know, the myriad of everyday things. And that's where we actually need to know how to apply what we read in God's Word to the very ordinary stuff of everyday life, and that's what we call wisdom. So, can we have the next picture, please? I took this photo last night from our house in Kingston. I just happened to look out the window. Mount Wellington's on the left, and maybe you could see it better if the lights weren't on, but we're not going to turn the lights out. I think you can get the idea of it. I suddenly saw this out the window. It only lasted for about a minute or so, and I took a photo because I thought, you know, sometimes I feel like I'm on the left of this picture, where everything's foggy and cloudy and dark, and I don't know which way to go. I don't know which is the right decision to make, because actually I don't know the future. There's only one person who knows the future, and that's God. So that's why we've got to connect to Him and His wisdom, and that's why we put together what He's got in the Word with what His Spirit gives us of His wisdom for the now, for the today, and for the tomorrow. Because actually, you know, often when we're making decisions, I think, I don't know. I haven't got a clue, because if I knew that this was going to happen, or if I knew that this family member was going to get sick, or I was going to get sick, you know, that would affect my decisions, but we don't know. So we have to go with the one that does know. Sometimes when I'm on the left, what I want is a breakthrough in the clouds. Isn't it? I just like this picture. I just suddenly thought, you know, the bits of light that come through the clouds, in between the clouds, that's to me like getting light from God's wisdom when, you're in the middle of a cloudy place. And so that's why I took the photo, and that's why I put it up there, and I like it. Okay, next picture. Now, again, it's not so clear perhaps because we've got lights on, but I think you can get the picture. This is a photo taken of one of my many classes of students. This one happens to be in India. I'm sitting there on the right with my legs stretched out, and the reason is I can't walk. I'd just broken something in my kneecap, and so instead of us sitting in a classroom, which was downstairs, the students went to the principal of the college and said, can we please come upstairs to where, Stuart and I, they let us stay on that occasion on the best flat on campus, which we don't deserve really, but it was free, so they put us there. And there we are, all sitting around, and I haven't got my walking frame in the picture, but there I am, teaching on the right. And those students there come from India and Nepal and Myanmar. Now, when I look at that class, and when I look at many of my classes that I've taught, I think one of the things that they ask more than anything is, how can I get wisdom? What I really, really need in life is wisdom. And you know what? When I'm in churches in Australia and I'm talking to young people, do I hear that? Sorry, I don't hear that very much. And yet these people are eagerly wanting wisdom for their lives. They think that is the most important thing you can get. That is worth far more above degrees and education and all that kind of stuff. But, that's useful, and they're there doing a degree. But what they really, really need is wisdom. You don't have to be an academic person to get wisdom. Farmers need wisdom, don't you? Some of you are farmers or have been farmers. We've only been play farmers. We're not kind of true dinky-dive farmers. But, I know enough to know, and the book of Proverbs knows a lot about, well, it doesn't say a lot, but it says more than any other book about farming. Why? Because you need wisdom. You need to look at, you need to observe the seasons. You need to observe the soil, see what kind it is. Today we'd say the pH of the soil and various other factors. You need to see what kind of plants suit your environment and what's going to work. You need to know what kind of animals are going to be able to thrive on your kind of vegetation. Then you need to know how to check the animals to make sure that they're healthy. You need to know the market, to know what is sensible to grow so that you're going to make a profit. You've got to consider all those factors and you put them together, and that's what the Bible calls wisdom. That's just one aspect of it. This week, I had to make a decision that you might think is very trivial, especially after hearing David say this morning that God doesn't care what clothes you wear. In one sense, that's true. He's looking at the heart. That's absolutely right. But this week, I was asked to record a short video, for India. One of my former students asked me to do this, or to give this some teaching. So what did I have to think about? What clothes we're going to wear? Now, I'm sitting in Tasmania, so what am I going to do? The audience is Indian, and thinking, what I know about Indian men, because I've taught a lot of them, and how forthright some of the South Indians are, about what they think about women's clothing. Their standards of modesty and my standards of modesty are quite different. So I can think in Australia, this is what I'd wear, maybe what I've got on now, and that might be fine. But Indians don't think of it in the same way. So then I decided, I think the wisest thing to do is wear Indian clothing. So that's what I did, because that just stops all distractions, all debate about whether I'm wearing the correct thing and whether I've got the right bits of my body showing or not showing, or, all that sort of stuff. So you see, you need wisdom not just in relation to God, but in relation to other people, so that we are not causing unnecessary conflict and problems. So life is like this all the time. That's every day. That's what we're needing to do. But, I just wish, I think we have to recover. Rather than saying, I wish, we need to set the example for our younger people to be able to say that we are people who are continually seeking wisdom. Hopefully we have learned a bit of it along the way, but are we there yet? Have we finished learning everything there is to learn about wisdom? I still have a long way to go. I'm thankful for the bits that God has given me along the way. But when I'm stressed and when I'm tired, am I always wise? No. So I still need to learn more, and I still need the checks and balances from other people around me in place to help me, to keep me on a path that is wise. Next one. We've got one story here in the New Testament of what I think is an example of wisdom in a tricky decision-making situation. This is in Acts 15, where some of actually Paul and Barnabas have gone out, and a lot of people among the Gentiles with no Jewish background have become Christians. Now their values, their morals, their food, and all kinds of things were quite different from the practices of the Jews. And yet clearly the Holy Spirit has come on these people, and Peter knows that he's actually seen evidence that it's the same Holy Spirit that's come on these people, but yet some in the church, those with a strong Pharisee kind of background, have started to tell everybody, these people have got to get circumcised, these people have to keep all of the Jewish laws. What's the church going to do? Yeah, you've kind of got two different groups here. It's not that they believe in a different God, it's not different religions, but it's different day-to-day practices, different food. How do you have communion? How do you have a fellowship meal? Paul writes about it in Romans 14. He says, some of you eat meat, some of you won't eat meat. Some of you drink alcohol, some of you don't drink alcohol. And how do you have a church lunch? And then you've got people who say, I'll keep all of the Jewish holidays, and so I'm not going to just do ordinary things on that day. And then you've got the other people saying, I don't care about Jewish holidays. I'm not interested in that. I have nothing to do with it. How do you get them to come together? And then you've got some of them wanting to gather on a Saturday, some of them wanting to gather on a Sunday. Well, what do? Meet at midnight? Can you see how tricky this was? So they had this big council, this big gathering. Some churches might call it a synod or a presbytery, some fancy word. But it's a get-together of the church leaders. And so people got up and they stood up and they said their different points of view. And they were different. So people on this side, people on this side, and there was no resolution. You've just got a difference of opinion. So how's the church going to operate? The whole point of them coming together was to try to find a way forward. And then one man who hasn't said anything has been quietly listening to all this going on is a man called James, who seems to have been the brother of Jesus. Now, when they'd finished talking, that's all these people with different points of view, James spoke up. He said, brothers, listen to me. Simon has described to us how God at first showed his concern by taking from the Gentiles a people for himself. In other words, it's clearly proven these other people are truly Christians. And then he starts to tell them a bit from the Old Testament about how the Gentiles will come to Christ. So he says, don't be surprised. This is in fulfilment of Scriptures. And then he says, it's my judgment that we should not make it difficult for the Gentiles to come to Christ, who are turning to God. And so he said we should write them a letter and just say, just be careful of these three things. Don't eat the meat that's offered to idols, which they would have been doing because that's where they had their get-togethers in the marketplace. You know, they go to because it's kind of like a butcher shop, really. But they're offered to idols. He said, don't do it because, causes disruptions. He said, stay away from sexual immorality. And, of course, they hadn't been so clear about sexual immorality before. And he said, just be careful that the meat still doesn't have the blood in it and it's kind of killed properly. That he said, we'll just leave it at that and we'll sort it out. So that's what he did. They're the rules that he gave to the Gentiles, but he did not say that the Gentiles had to be circumcised. He did not say they had to keep all the rest of it. He came up with something which was moderate, something which was doable, and something which would bring peace and enable the two groups to be able to meet together and say, okay, right, if James thinks we don't have to keep with all of the rest of the rigmarole, we're not going to bother about it either. He's a peacemaker. Now, what gave James the capacity to stand up and say that and have everybody suddenly agree? They'd all been 5 minutes before in great disagreement, and now they're suddenly in great agreement. And those letters went out, and that was the end of it. Well, there were still a few ructions in churches, but basically, it didn't have to come to the council again. I think it was a word of wisdom. Now, in 1 Corinthians 12, where we're told that we have the one Holy Spirit who gives different kinds of gifts, the first one is called the word of wisdom, or the message of wisdom. A bit further down the list, there's another one called discerning of spirits. That's a kind of wisdom gift too. And depending on what church you go to, some of them just ignore the list entirely, we know that. Some of them will focus on the more spectacular gifts. Some churches are really big on the healing gifts or the gifts of a word of knowledge or tongues or whatever. They're all gifts from God, every single one of them. But of course we tend to pick and choose and have our favourites. But right there at the top is the gift of wisdom. And I think it's downplayed. And yet it is a staple in our churches and in our families and in our everyday lives. You can't have a church functioning well without gifts of wisdom operating in the leadership somehow, somewhere. And today, I believe you're voting. Is that right? You all need wisdom for that too. Next one. This man's name is Paul. He's an Anglican minister in Ghana. And it's a fairly high church. So I'm not sure that he would be all that keen on all the gifts that are written in 1 Corinthians 12. But I have both the pleasure and displeasure, have had both, of working with this man for nearly 7 years. He's working on a PhD on the question of polygamy and how the church deals with people who have many wives. How do you evangelise in Ghana, in his area, which is very high in polygamy? How do you reach the people with the gospel when, the church says polygamy is wrong and the people, the vast majority in the community, say polygamy is good and right and given by God and the normal way of living? This man, Paul, comes from a polygamous family himself, as do most people in the area. he's not allowed to have any more than one wife because he's an Anglican priest. And so when he first started working with me 7 years ago, he wasn't very happy he was given a woman supervisor, white woman supervisor from a Western country who wouldn't understand what was going on. And so we've had quite a few struggles where he has actually rejected me and I felt like rejecting him. And some of the stuff he wrote, because he was very strongly in favour of polygamy, I just thought this is almost pornographic. I can't, Paul, you cannot write this in an academic thesis. You can't do this. But underneath all of that was a heart of a man who wanted to bring a reconciliation and bring peace between the church and the culture and the community of the people where the church is ministering. So I had to try and find where is he coming from, and thinking this is a man with a very different cultural background from where I come from, but this is a very real issue, and it's an extremely difficult issue when you're in Africa, especially certain parts of Africa. Now, I'm not there. I've never met this man face to face, just by emails and Facebook and everything. And so I have often thought, what I need more than anything is gifts of wisdom. And what this man needs in writing for the church, especially he's targeting the Anglican church, but actually this will be read by all the churches. He also needs wisdom. So we have been engaging in this struggle and going back and forth and looking at different scriptures, and he's also done a big research survey, and we've been putting it all together. And I think yesterday he finished. Now, we've still got to tidy up a few loose ends, but basically he's written his thesis, and many times along the way I thought, how can we ever do this? It's been a big exercise in wisdom. And guess what? Along the way, he has come to his own conclusion that having one wife is better. It's to my great relief, and maybe to his wife's great relief as well. And so he's not going to be persuading the church in Ghana to change that now that he's actually looked at the scriptures and looked at various other social factors, etc., which we've had to do together. So that's just been one example, and I'm sure the church here the leaders don't have to make that decision. But in every group of people, there are differences and there are difficulties. And even though you all look lovely right now, like you all are best friends, and I hope you are, difficulties happen in the course of human life. None of us is perfect, and the people that are in church with us together, they're not perfect either. But we're all hopefully facing the same direction, and in that case we can be given wisdom from above, as James encourages us to ask for. Next one. Yes, Stuart's going to read this. This is another bit from Proverbs. Now listen carefully to this passage to think what is important for you in this passage about seeking wisdom.
Proverbs chapter 2, verses 1 to 15. My son, if you accept my words and store up my commands within you, turning your ear to wisdom and applying your heart to understanding, indeed, if you call out for insight and cry aloud for understanding, and if you look for it as for silver and search for it as for hidden treasure, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. For the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He holds success in store for the upright. He is a shield to those whose walk is blameless, for he guards the course of the just and protects the way of his faithful ones. Then you will understand what is right and just and fair, every good path. For wisdom will enter your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. Discretion will protect you, and understanding will guard you. Wisdom will save you from the ways of wicked men, from men whose words are perverse, who have left the straight paths to walk in dark ways, who delight in doing wrong and rejoice in the perverseness of evil, whose paths are crooked and who are devious in their ways.
This is a quick opportunity for calling out answers. What's one thing that you notice that is beneficial about looking for wisdom? Can you just have like one at a time, one word answer, or not necessarily what I've written there, could be, but what when you heard it, what's that? Keep you safe from wickedness. That's a pretty important benefit. Thank you. Very good idea. Don't let your tongue go before your brain. And that's why James talks a lot about the tongue, because that's about wisdom as well. Wisdom in speech. And I know that sometimes if I'm upset or angry about something, I'll kind of feel like shooting off an email. But before I do, I usually show it to Stuart, and by the time he's read it 3 seconds later, I've deleted it and wait till I've calmed down and write something that's a bit more sensible. Yes? If you love one another. Yes. Don't jump in where angels fear to tread. Yes. That's my mother used to know. I don't know. I heard it anyway. It might have been my mother. Yes, you've got to know when to jump in. Sometimes you do need to jump in, and sometimes you do need to jump in fast. But you've got to know it's right. You've got to have a sense of peace, and you've got to know that you are the person who has the responsibility and the authority to jump in. Anything else? Oh, yes. Promise of success. That's a big thing about wisdom. When I said about farming, you're observing all these things, and then before you make a decision, why are you observing them? When you observe how people behave, you're looking to see what works. Wisdom is very much about what works. What works in practical, daily life. Not just what's some fairy theory that somebody says, but what actually brings success in life. I think back in the Old Testament, in Ecclesiastes, which is also another book about wisdom, there's somebody acting like King Solomon saying, oh, well, I thought that riches would get me all my delights in life. So I had loads and loads of riches, and what happened? I wasn't satisfied. Life's not about that. Well, I thought that if I had lots of houses, it would do it. Sorry, no, it didn't. I thought that if I got lots of women, that would do it. Definitely not. In fact, did the opposite for him. And then he said, I thought I'd get lots of wisdom. Because the Bible says wisdom's good, except I think he went after the wrong kind of wisdom. God gave him enough of the right sort, and then you can actually end up with the wrong sort of wisdom, the sort that puffs you up with pride. And, you might get lots of degrees, or you might be voted the best in the community in whether it's farming or in whether it's whatever, it doesn't matter. But have you got wisdom? They're not the same. Stuart, can you read the next, is it the next passage? Yeah, just go down to the next one. No, keep going, Tony. Yeah.
James chapter 3, verses 13 to 18. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbour bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom, in inverted commas, does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere, peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness.
If we can just go back to the chap Paul in Ghana, although he came to the same conclusion that really what the church wanted, whether that is that one wife is enough, the big question was still, how do you deal with the people who are polygamists, who are already married to multiple wives, and how do you deal with their wives in a way that is also compassionate if they are genuinely seeking Christ? What do you do? Do you just reject them outright because, no, that doesn't fit in with the church's teaching? Do you let them get up on their soapbox and try and convince everybody else that polygamy is good? And so that's the tricky bit, because what you're aiming for is peace. You're aiming for justice. You're aiming for people to be able to be brought together without there being any compromise to the truth and without there being any compromise to your respect and care for each of the people involved. In Ghana, if a man were just to put away all the wives except his first wife, where would they go? Who'd look after them? Who'd feed their children? There's real issues involved, and that's where you need wisdom. And so he's come up with some proposals which are pretty good, considering that he's got the same background as these people he's trying to reach, of how to show compassion. One of the things in that last reading was about, that it mentioned, was humility. You know, Jesus says we need to come into the kingdom as like a child. So, down here. And yet, when you look at this picture of true wisdom, there's also a childlike humility about true wisdom, and yet we often think of a child down here and the one who has wisdom being up here. You know, like a little person and a person that's grown up. But actually, a childlike heart is what gives you or puts you in the position to be able to receive God's wisdom. So you start in the kingdom of God with a childlike attitude of receiving Jesus. But it's the same place that you also are open to receiving God's wisdom. We don't suddenly become so grown up that we don't need to be childlike in our attitude anymore. It's actually the opposite. So being a childlike, not in childish, foolish stuff, puts us in that place to become wise and to act wisely. So the child and the older person who is wise can actually be connected very well. Can we go on to the next one? I don't know what your questions in life are. I'll just give you one story which I'll try to make very quick and then we'll just about be finished. A number of years ago, our youngest, quite a lot of years ago, I have 4 children. We have 4 children. And it was time for the youngest one to go to school. So what did I think as a mother? I'm free. I can go look for a job. You know, I might be able to go to work part-time, or I didn't know, part-time, full-time, what to do. So what do? Ask God. I want wisdom. What to do? I was trained as a teacher, so my natural thinking was apply for some jobs teaching. So I started to do that, and then God interfered with my plan. He said the one word to me. He said, wait. I thought, what? Well, I've been waiting 13 years when we've had these children and raised them. Why do I have to wait any longer? He just said that one word, wait. And I knew what it meant. I knew I had some piano students in the afternoon. I was allowed to do that. I could do housework, not my most favourite activity, but I could do that. I could do ordinary things, but I was not allowed to go out yet to get a job. And so I did that for a few weeks. And then I thought, there's this Bible study on that I'd really like to go to. God likes Bible studies. Surely he'll be happy if I go. Well, I went to go out the door and I couldn't find my keys. And I thought, I've put my keys into my handbag. I remembered. I mean, I can forget things, but, I thought, I was pretty confident I'd put them into the hidden pocket inside my handbag. So if you ever want to find my keys, that's probably where they are. And I went to my handbag, I went there, I felt them, I opened the zip, I even got the lining and I shook it inside out, no keys, no sound, no feel, nothing. And so I put it all, my bag all back together. I did that process over and over again, no keys. The Bible study finished at about 12. About 12:30 I went back to the handbag and did it again, and there the keys were, exactly where I left them. And God said to me again, the keys to all of the things you want to do are hidden in the secret place. I thought, I know what that means. That means prayer. God's got his purposes. We've been singing about that. I had my agenda, and I thought I knew what God would like, so I could go off and do that. But anyway, he had his own idea here. And then a week later, the Bible study was time to start again. And I thought, well, I'm not going to try going to this Bible study again because I know what's going to happen. Pointless. And then once I decided not to go, what did God do? He said, go to the Bible study. Talk about perverse. I went to the Bible study, and there, due to various things that were said, reading of the Word and some things that people said, I knew exactly what God wanted me to do. I knew that we had to do another musical. I knew which musical we had to do, when we had to start. And I also was on track to start that God wanted me to do theological studies. Like, my idea was just go back teaching. God's idea was a change of direction. So, because he is the only one that knows the future, and he's the only one that knows his purposes for us. That's why it's important to keep coming back to him for wisdom. And sometimes the answer is just going to be like a click of an idea. This makes sense. This is what I should do. And it's just that simple. Most of the time it's like that. But this time God wanted me to on a change of direction, which is why it had to be a little bit clearer. Next one, Tony. You've seen this picture before? Where are you? In your own mind, you don't have to tell me. Are you under the cloud? Or are you under the lights of God showing you his wisdom? I think it varies a bit, you know how the clouds come and go. But don't forget the picture. And the next one. This is it. Goes back to the first one. Wherever we are, whatever we do, we need to seek wisdom. When I first read these verses when I was a teenager, I actually committed myself to pray every day for wisdom for a while. I can't remember how long it was. I'm glad I did that. I probably need to do it again because I'm not there yet. I still need an awful lot more wisdom. Thanks very much.